Hello, this is Sam Gerrans from truthinthenews.info. Today is Sunday the 1st of May 2022 and we're going to look at another piece of, well, I expect it's propaganda. I don't know, I haven't looked at it in any detail yet. From one of our normal sources. This is the Independent, laughingly called, but it doesn't matter which newspaper it's from because it's all basically the same. I use the Independent and the Guardian as my go-tos because they are supposedly for intelligent people and also they don't have a paywall. And they're representative of the sort of stuff you're going to get. So it doesn't really matter what you look at. You can apply the same principles to everything. So if you don't know this, I'm just going to grind you through the main basic types of propaganda you're going to get. In this case, we're looking at Russia's special operation in Ukraine, but you can apply this and you should apply it to everything, not only, in fact, to gauge whether or not it is propaganda. And pretty much everything you read in the mainstream media in the West falls into this category, at least as far as I'm concerned. But also education is a form of propaganda, I would argue, certainly it's become that, entertainment, all the rest of it. So please don't sort of write to me and say, oh, you're shilling for Putin or whatever it is. I have my own view on the war, certainly, of what's going on in Ukraine, and that's why I'm concentrating on this. But I think the intelligent people watching this understand that these are principles you can apply to everything. Anyway, very briefly, the main facets or the main characteristics which propaganda will have. The first one is unrelated items.
Hello, how are you doing?
This is somebody trying to insinuate themselves into your life. They've got no business there. They're trying to make a connection between what they want and what you're doing seem natural when in fact it's not natural. Propaganda often has this. The second one is opinion leader.
Just tell me exactly what to do and how to do it.
They're going to tell you exactly what to do and how to do it. This is the expert or increasingly somebody like an actor or a singer or somebody with bottom implants. By virtue of the fact that they're well known, generally speaking, that is taken now by what one would call the herd to be a qualification for following that person. Because most people, I don't think it's a big secret, they're generally pretty lazy and increasingly stupid. But they don't want to admit either of those things, and so they adopt opinions, like they go shopping. They go shopping for opinions. So these people are there to give them opinions. I don't say this is good or bad or indifferent. I'm just saying this is what is. So the next one is missing context. She's my favorite. Maria Gonzalez. She's discovered that her boyfriend Juan has not been telling her the entire truth. Missing context is really important to the way that propaganda works because it leaves you with an impression that if you knew the whole story or the missing, as it were, elephant in the room, you would realize what a bunch of tripe it is that you're being sold. And I've said this before, and I would say is again, unfortunately I have to kind of stuck with repeating myself in this, that if you know anything about any particular subject, doesn't matter what it is, whether it's trout fishing in the Norfolk Broads or what it's like to live in Botswana, just because of your own life experience, then if you can find something in the mainstream media which treats of these particular subjects, you'll see that your experience and what they're talking about are just light years apart. In fact, if you didn't already know what they were supposed to be describing, you wouldn't have recognized what they're talking about by their description of it. That's normally how it is. I've seen this in my own life living in Russia. And I used to sort of keep an eye, I do still keep an eye on the so-called news, but for me it's more just like it's a way of seeing where they're guiding the herd. I don't look at it obviously for anything even remotely approaching actual information. But there were, I think it was Andrew Osborne was his name for a while, wrote about Russia, and then Luke Harding and then various other people. I happened to live in Russia, lived here a long time, and reading these people's descriptions of Russia, I was just left thinking, have you actually been here? Apparently they had. Harding certainly lived here. So, but, they have a job to do and they do it. And this isn't just a matter of my perception versus your perception. This isn't what I'm talking about. I understand people have got different points of view. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the manufacture of a narrative that has no real basis in reality. That's what I'm talking about, which is increasingly what passes for news is in the West. And that is all that it is. The next one is obfuscation and simulation. This is Zoe.
Add me as a friend.
Zoe's going to pretend like might be your girlfriend at some point in the future, but she never ever will. Not ever. Not ever. She's got 28 different guys all messaging her, and she's going to keep those plates spinning the best she can. But she has to kind of leave you with an impression that someday she might do this thing that you wanted to do. Well, this is what journalists do. They leave you with the impression that one day they're going to be journalists or going to do what journalists are supposed to do. And now form has so much taken over from content in the West that rather than anything actually being something real, it's a simulation or pretense. It's a sort of cardboard copy or cutout of the thing that it's pretending to be. Well, journalism's no different. That's precisely what it does. It has to do it because, you pretend to think and they pretend to be journalists. It's a sort of collusion. All right, the next one is gaslighting. Gaslighting is the assumed conclusions. It's when the conclusions, the prefabricated conclusions, are built into the actual waft and web of what it is. It's pretending to be news. You just have to spot. When you spot those, you realise that it's like saying, well, how many times a week? When did you stop? When did you stop beating your wife? It's that sort of thing where you can't answer the question without agreeing to the precepts and the sort of suppositions that are built into the form of the question. Well, this is what entertainment and all this stuff does, so-called journalism. And I regard the news as basically it's the longest running soap opera ever. That's all it is. It's nothing more than that. It's not there to give you any real information. What it's there to do is to manage what's left of your mind so that you will cooperate in your own imprisonment. In fact, it's already too late. You're already imprisoned. There's no way out of this. I'm not trying to save anybody. I don't believe that there's anything you can do about it. I'm just describing the features of the prison that you're already in. That's it. Okay, the next one is line demonization.
They took the babies out of the incubators. Took the incubators and left the children to die on the cold floor.
Okay, this was a very famous lie, one of many, many thousands of lies, of actual lies or demonizations. This was during the Iraqi invasion of Kuwait. Anyway, this is a famous lie. I'm not going to go over it again. And propaganda payload.
Scuttle, look what we found.
This is the thing that often propaganda's got embedded within it. Sometimes it's just what I call ground bait. It's just a sort of general sort of reinforcing of impressions and delusions that you've got. But sometimes there is an actual point that they want you to get. This would be the moral of the story, the thing you're supposed to believe, the thing you're supposed to come away with. That's what they want you to believe, okay? So if you can spot these things, then you're playing basically propaganda bingo. And the reason why I call this truth in the news, as I've said before, and actually everything that I'm probably ever going to say, I've already said, because there's only a certain amount of ways you can describe how to play noughts and crosses. It's a very limited game, okay? This is the same. And the reason why it's called truth in the news is because there used to be the joke in the Soviet Union where people understood that it was all propaganda. There were two main sort of more serious papers at the time. One was called Pravda, which means truth, and the other was Izvestia, which means news. And the joke was there's no truth in the news and no news in the truth. Well, once you understand that that's what you're living in now, then you no longer have to play propaganda bingo, because what will happen is it's almost like that line from The Matrix where I think it's Cypher, I looked it up, it's Cypher who says, I don't see ones and zeros anymore. All I see is the woman in the red dress. Well, this is me looking at the news, so-called. All I see, it's like somebody who's studied, for example, screenplay writing or music. You understand if it's music, okay, this is verse, middle eight, verse, chorus, out, whatever it is. This is how somebody who deals with music, popular music on a regular basis, is how they see it. Or if you're a chef, it's just how you understand that this is how it works. There is this type of cooking, that type of cooking, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's all this is for me. And I find this, as you probably can tell, interminably boring. But I decided to do this because, frankly, to be honest about it and kind of direct, because of the way the Russians were treated by the media vis-a-vis what they were doing in Mariupol. And it irritated me be out of the confines of my own indifference to this particular subject. And I thought, well, I know it's too late anyway, but I will make a few videos to explain to people how this all works. Although it's like, in cookery terms, me explaining to someone, none of this is difficult. None of it is difficult. It's like explaining how to make cheese on toast. That's all. Why, it's like a chef might say, well, why don't people know how to make cheese on toast? And they keep pointing at this cheese on toast as though it was some sort of incredible thing that, oh, we have cheese on toast, we are free. Yeah, it's cheese on toast. You do understand what cheese on toast is comprised of. It's a piece of bread with some butter, some cheese on top of it. You grill it for 5 minutes and you eat it. Maybe with some Tabasco sauce. Well, that's all this is. It's no more complicated than what I've just described. Anyway, let's look at today's piece of tosh, and I can say that it will be a piece of tosh with some degree of confidence because I know, where it comes from and what the subject is. I haven't read it. I have had a quick skim through it. I know how long it is. And I know what the title is, but we will be discovering the inner recesses of this piece of journalistic integrity and superlative wonder together, just to make it a little bit more interesting for me. So anyway, let's have a look at it. This is from the Independent in italics and laughingly called, and we'll just go through it. And it's from, when was this? 14 hours ago. So this was put out yesterday, and it's called Russia. Quote, forced to merge depleted units from failed advances in Ukraine. UK says, well, first of all, let's just be clear about it. UK doesn't say anything. I'm English. I've never heard UK say anything because a country can't speak. It doesn't have a mouth. So it's somebody who's speaking on behalf of the UK as presented in the media. Next bit is failed advances. Says who? Anybody who knows anything about real war and how it really works, I personally would recommend Scott Ritter. If you look him up on YouTube and search by upload to date, or Colonel Doug McGregor, you'll find out what their opinion is on this. I'm not a military genius or anything, but I can certainly learn the bones of pretty much anything quite quickly. And to say that failed advances, well, it depends. That's really assumed conclusions, isn't it? Because they're assuming that what Russia was doing was advancing to gain territory. But if you have a memory or a brain, or preferably both, you'll understand that isn't what Russia's stated aims are. The stated aims were made very clear by Putin, and he's set out what they are. But you won't ever hear any of those things, the things that the commander-in-chief of the country who's supposed to be so evil. Are you evil, Russians?
Yes, comrade.
All right, I'm so glad to hear that. What he said that they're out there doing. No, you hear about other people assuming that they know what he's doing, and then coming to the conclusion that he's failing in that. Okay, but I'm not saying that you should accept what I say is going on the ground or not. But if you would like an intelligent representation of that in the English language, then I suggest the Duran. The two, there's Alexander and Alex. They've both got separate channels as well. It's a very good analysis of the economics and the military aspect of it. If you want to see what's going on the ground, then in Mariupol, for example, then look up Patrick Lancaster. He's there on the ground, boots on the ground, doing the job that the media says it's doing but isn't really doing. And then have a good look at all of that. And then when you've had a look at it, then decide what you think. If you would like some background, then also look at John Mearsheimer's 2015 1.5 hour presentation on Ukraine. Now, this was made before people were gushing about Ukraine. They were gushing about something else then, but that will give you a background. Anyway, I'm going to move on now to the article. Western officials. So this is an appeal to authority, okay? They're official, so it must be more important than anything you could possibly work out. Believe Moscow's offensive in eastern Ukraine is going much slower than planned. So, did Russia say this? No. Western officials said it. Well, let's find out if we actually find out what their names are. Maybe we will, maybe we won't. But also much slower than planned. With the best will in the world, Western officials don't have any access to Putin's plan. I don't have any access to it either. I should imagine the amount of people who have access to that actual plan is probably less than you could fit into, quite a small room. Other people who actually have access to that particular plan. But they know that you're not going to think this through to this extent, or even think about it at all. What's going to happen in this article, and the reason I know this is because it happens in all articles, is that particular keywords are going to be appealed to and insinuated into your nervous system, so that at the end of this you'll come out with an impression gained not by analysis, not by reason, but by osmosis, which is a sort of unthinking, unfeeling state in which almost like that sort of semi-sleep state, by which these delivery payloads are mainlined into your nervous system and then confused by you with actual opinions reached by some process of intelligent cognitive process. But intelligent cognitive process isn't what's going to be going on here. What's going to be going on here is a mixture of surmise, gush, and outrage, which will be interpreted by the interface in your in your mind as facts, and you'll feel them to be true. And if people challenge you on them, you'll get angry, but you don't know anything. And that's just how it works. I don't wish to be insulting. I'm just saying this is how it works. Like making cheese on toast. It's not insulting to say this is how cheese on toast is made. It's just a statement of fact. This is how it's done. I'm not even describing how, haute cuisine is done. I'm talking about the meat and potatoes. Not even meat and potatoes. I'm talking about a sandwich level of propaganda. It gets much more subtle than this. This is the sandwich bar, okay? Okay, so there you have a picture of Russian soldiers. 2 Russian soldiers patrol. Well, they're not exactly on patrol. They're in a house in the Mariupol Drama Theatre a month after it was bombed. Now, this is quite interesting because they do assume that you have a sort of a memory, but not really that you have one, but they're referring or referencing something that you were told before. You were told before that the Mariupol Drama Theatre was cruelly bombed by those evil Russians, and here they are back in the hell that they've created. That, in the meantime, actually, if you look up, as I say, people like Patrick Lancaster and somebody else out there, I'm afraid whose name just escapes me at the moment, but this has been proven to be another lie. In fact, if you join, I'm not pushing my own stuff. I don't care if you join it or not, but I happen to have a Telegram thing channel, which is Truth in the News, unsurprisingly. And on there, I think yesterday I forwarded something which was very good, which gave the lie to all of this stuff. They know that it was the Ukrainians who did this. This is now that series of lies has now been completely debunked. But what they're doing here is referencing previous lies and hoping that you haven't learned anything useful in the meantime. Okay, as Vladimir Putin turns his focus to Ukraine's Donbass region, well, I'll just stop right there. I'm not here to kind of push Team Putin. That's not exactly what I'm doing. What I'm trying to do is to explain to you that Putin's presentation is very different to what we're used to in the West. It doesn't work the same here. Putin tends to do, in fact, he does do what he says he's going to do. He doesn't say stuff. He understands the mentality. You're better off not. It's like with a miscreant child. You're better off not making promises you can't keep. But if you make a promise, you should keep it, because that's the way to ensure that you get respect. Well, that's how it is here. So Putin doesn't make these weak, wistful promises. He's not Obama, or Obama drew more lines in the sand than it's possible to shake a stick at. In fact, I think he wore his own stick out doing it. It's not how it works here. So he actually told we know any Russian over the age of about 12 could tell you what the war aims the aims of the military operation in Ukraine are, and one of the key ones is protecting the Russian speakers, the Russian ethnic Russians in Donbass. So it's not he's turned his focus exactly. It's that everything has been. This is one of the 3 major war aims. The other 2 being denazification, demilitarization. Okay, I mean there are subordinate requirements, but those are the main ones. So everything that happened up to that point has been focused on this. This isn't he just now I'm going to go off to the Donbass because now I've changed my mind. No. It's called strategy. It's called having a plan. I know that this is kind of elided from the way that things work in the West now, certainly over the last 20 years or so, because it's a feelings-based economy. But that's not how it works here. And so anyway, I'm just pointing that out because I think I know where this is going. Russia has been forced quote, been forced to merge and redeploy depleted and disparate. I'm surprised they even use a word like disparate units, already weary from Moscow's failed offensives near Kiev, the UK government has claimed. There's so much here. You could just unpick this one sentence. The idea is that Russia's failing. Are you failing? Are you failing, Russians?
Yes, comrade.
But at the same time, are you brutal and evil and inhuman?
Yes, comrade.
Okay. I hope you're... Is it that you... Do you see any contradiction in any of this?
Yes, comrade.
Okay. He does see the contradiction. Are you going to do anything about it?
Yes, comrade.
Anyway, already weary from Moscow's failed offensives near Kiev. Were they failed? Well, 40,000 men managed to pin down 100,000 plus in change whilst they were doing other things, taking Mariupol and then moving everybody into the Donbass. The Donbass isn't something they've just kind of come up with. This has been the focus. It's called a pinning operation. They pinned them down in this place and then they went and did something else. But this was presented to you as a failure. And I don't care whether you think Russians are failing or not. It doesn't make any difference to me. It certainly doesn't make any difference to the Russian leadership because the facts on the ground are what they're going to be. And they're following a plan that they don't care what you feel about this. They don't care if you're in gush or in outrage. The West, as I said yesterday, is basically Amber Heard. Okay, there's nothing you can do with this except do what you're going to do and let them scream and hissy and froth at the mouth. But what's coming to you, unfortunately, I wish it weren't true, but it is true, is you're being taken down. And not just Europe, but I expect America to the same extent. But you were told about all of this. You were told by Klaus Schwab that you would own nothing. As I said yesterday, you own a lot less today than you did 6 months ago. So obviously this plan is being successful to some marked degree, but you're not supposed to notice any of this. And even amongst the very good analysts who are out there, and I do rate their work, otherwise I wouldn't recommend it. However, there seems to be this unwillingness to infer trajectories which are quite obvious to anyone, who's paying attention. Which is that, this is following, I would say, a much broader plan. But it doesn't submit to the type of deductive reasoning which is the preserve of these types of analysts and what makes them so good at what they do. So you're kind of stuck with having to, add that extra layer yourself if you're capable of that. Anyway, let's just push on with this. Otherwise we'll never get through it. I've got things to do. An intelligence update. Updates. There's something you know about in the West, isn't it? Updates. Because whenever I go there, I don't go there anymore, but when I used to go there, I noticed that everybody had been updated with the latest round of vocabulary that they were all using. The rubbish or the trash, as you call it in America. I don't know if it's true in America, but certainly the UK has been redubbed. It's been renamed. It's now the recycling. Everything's very, very. It's all about doctrine. Anyway, an intelligence update on Saturday. The Ministry of Defence, well, obviously that's an appeal to authority, suggested, didn't claim, but suggested that the Kremlin was seeking to, quote, rectify the tactical and logistical issues which have hampered its invasion of Ukraine to date. This is all missing context. This article it depends for its existence upon your total ignorance of the entire situation, which, in a Western context is a fairly safe bet. But I think people watching this channel, I have had somebody say in the comments, they're probably right, that I'm basically preaching to the, to the converted, singing to the choir, preaching to the choir, singing to the choir. No, preaching to the choir. I guess that's true. But I'm really doing this so that there is a kind of playlist out there for people if they're interested. So anyway, but the whole idea of this is these is all assumed conclusions as well and missing context. But let's just carry on, otherwise we'll never get through this. Moscow is hoping, they know what Moscow hopes now, is hoping to achieve by this, quote, geographically concentrating combat power, shortening supply lines and simplifying command and control, the MOD said. Now that sounds really technical, doesn't it? How could you possibly doubt somebody could come up with that stream of actually otherwise meaningless words? But who cares about any of that? Let's just carry on. But it claims that Mr. Putin's forces, quote, still face considerable challenges and that, quote, shortcomings in Russian tactical coordination remain. I'm not here to claim the Russians don't have any challenges. They're fighting an extremely large, very well trained, very well equipped NATO force. Russia is beating actually NATO. It's a war. It's a real, special military operation is a way of calling it. But to the people, certainly to the civilians, it's indistinguishable from war. Okay, so sure, the Russians are taking hits and taking losses, but what this is predicated upon is the idea that Russia's gone in there to acquire territory. And that's not the case. All you have to do is listen to what Putin said he was going to do. That's it. It's not rocket science. There's nothing. As I say, this is just cheese on toast that I'm describing here. It's not difficult. Many of the units deployed in Russia's eastern offensive are, quote, likely suffering from weakened morale. Really? And your basis for this is what? Especially as they are encircling between 60 and 100,000, or however many of them are left, of the Ukrainian soldiers in the Donbass region, tightening their grip around them in the form of a cauldron formation and bombing them into oblivion. So what's the basis for this? I'm not happy about this. The reason why I'm not here for Russia against Ukraine. I'm here against these pieces of filth who promote this rubbish, that keep this going. There are tens of thousands of Ukrainian soldiers who have been needlessly thrown into the meat grinder of the Russian military machine in order to achieve geopolitical aims, one of which, if you want my view on it, is taking you lot down. And it only works because, I suppose it works because they're right, fundamentally, about how propaganda works and how effective it normally is. So why am I bothering doing this? I don't really know, except that I felt I had to do something. And also I do think that there is a small number of people out there. I don't believe in this, big numbers thing, which is supposed to be so important. But there's a small number of people out there who could benefit from and perhaps have some use for what I might call a sort of informational Swiss Army knife, just so they could, open their tin of beans and so on. This isn't sophisticated stuff, but just so they can at least have one layer of firewall against this. Anyways, carry on. But it is claimed still faces considerable challenges and shortcomings in tacticals. Weakened morale, while, quote, a lack of unit-level skills and inconsistent air support have left Russia unable to fully leverage its combat mass, even despite localized improvements. Okay, now here's a key word. Improvements, according to the MOD. Now remember how hopelessly failing the Russians were supposed to be. Were you hopelessly failing Russians?
Yes, comrade.
You see, they were bogged down and all of this. But the key word here, and if you want my take on it, this is it. The propaganda payload. I think we found it.
Scuttle, look what we found!
Is the word improvements. Because at some point they're going to have to swing you lot round from Russia failing to Russia's it's failed in the sense of it's won it. If you can talk of victory in this sort of way. I mean, they've taken Mariupol. They'll certainly finish in Donbass as long as the Western agencies don't use some sort of chemical weapons false flag thing, which I think it's possible. I think they're certainly considering it. But failing those sorts of things, it's quite clear that Russians, there's no way they're going to lose this. All right, I might not even read all of this because it's so dull and people haven't got the attention span, so I better just hurry up. The UK's assessment appears to echo beliefs in Washington that Mr. Putin's forces have made only minor gains in Donbass in the month since Russia announced it would focus its military strength in the eastern region following a retreat from Ukraine's north. I mean, just again, they pinned down Kiev while they were doing other things. They've moved to Donbass. The Donbass has always been one of the main features of this, the main foci of this. Have made only minor gains. On what metric? Again, Putin said what his objectives were. Demilitarization. It means the strong military. They're not interested in territory. It's a really difficult thing to grasp for some people. But anyway, what's the point? As Russians Russian troops try to move north out of the devastated city of Mariupol in order to advance. Try to move north. That's an interesting use of words. In order to advance on Ukrainian soldiers from the south, their progress has been, quote, slow and uneven and certainly not decisive, an unnamed US defense official told Associated Press. I hope this bores you as much as it bores me. They think you're morons. I think that in the vast majority of cases, when they're talking about Western audience, effectively, there's not much to point in any kind of other direction from that. But this is the level of the propaganda now. They're so lazy about it because there's no point making good stuff because people are too stupid to understand it, as far as I can see. In part because of the tenacity. Oh, here we go. The tenacity of Ukrainian resistance. The US believes the Russians are at least several days behind where they wanted to be. Have you had any actual facts to this point? Has there been any sort of what you could call anything objective that you could relate this to? These are unnamed sources. This is hearsay. This is their imagination or imagining of what Russia thinks it wants. This is news, is it? Is it really? I suggest that you'd be much better to spend your time finding out from somebody like Scott Ritter what's really going on the ground. There are other sources as well. The chaps at the Duran will give you some. Patrick Lancaster, just spend half an hour looking at Patrick Lancaster's YouTube channel and then you decide. In an operational update on Saturday, Ukraine's defense ministry claimed 14 Russian offensives had been repelled in Donetsk and Lugansk over the previous 24 hours, with Moscow enjoying no successes in its attempts to seize control of 3 target areas in the regions Liman, Severodonetsk and Popasna, I don't know where the stress would be on that. Popasna, I guess. If you want some alternative information on that, just go on to Telegram, join any number of channels, and you'll see Ukrainians, unfortunately, if you can stomach it, being blown to pieces, in very large numbers. It's horrific and increasingly old, if you don't mind me saying so, and unimpressive soldiers surrendering in quite large numbers. That's what's really going on. Lugansk, they're spelling it in the Ukrainian way here, but I would say Lugansk. Governor Serhiy Gaidar told local broadcasters that although Russia was shelling all over the region, they cannot get through our defense. The Russian artillery it's portable hell, and I wouldn't wish being on the receiving end of that on my worst enemy. But anyway, what they want to do is keep this war going, because this is a geopolitical pivot. That's what Ukraine is being sacrificed for, in my opinion. But anyway, who cares about any of that? However, Russian attacks destroyed 2 schools and 20 houses in Rubizhny and Popasna. I would say Apasna. Apasna means dangerous in Russian. Mr. Gaidai said, adding that civilians would continue to be evacuated despite the difficult situation. So the idea is these noble Ukrainians, I'm not saying there are no noble Ukrainians, but certainly some very brutal people in the Ukrainian forces who subscribe to a doctrine and ideology that has been given to them by the CIA, has been certainly fostered by them, and we call it Nazism. And that's what you're supporting. If you're in the West, you're supporting Nazism. And if you want to know how they treat their own civilian population, then again, look at Patrick Lancaster's channel, and you'll see people talking very freely on that. Or go to my channel, Telegram channel, that is Truth in the News, and just go back. I think you can, if you join a channel, you can look back on what's previously been published, and just watch it and see what you come to what conclusion you come to. 2 buses sent to evacuate civilians from Popasna were fired on by Russian troops on Friday. Really? And there had been no word from the drivers. A local official said, "This is a novel. This isn't news, and there are no facts here." Anyway, let's carry on. Russia's defense ministry claimed that its artillery units had struck 389 Ukrainian targets overnight, including 35 control points and 15 arms and ammunition depots. I find the Russian official channels to be consistently reliable. And the reason why I think they're being consistent, one of the reasons, I'm not saying it's because Russians are, inherently more honest than anyone else. It's because I think that the Russians are fighting a different sort of war, and they're playing the long game. They're not just here to win this military operation. They're here to have tribunals when this is all over. And I would say that the battles that are going on in Ukraine right now are basically the last battles of World War II. They've been kept in the freezer for the last 70 years. And Russia is on the side of what used to be called the Allied forces. And you lot, you're fighting on the side of the Nazis. And I think that it's going to take that, because you're immoral, you have no morality, you have no scruples other than a consistent commitment to your own appetites. It's impossible to convince a Westerner, a modern Western, of any moral wrongdoing, because they don't have any moral compass. I mean, look how degraded you are. It's anybody from like a few generations ago would just, walking down a main London street now, if you put somebody from, 200 years ago, they would probably just be sick, physically ill. And if they knew what the society was about, they would certainly be sick. That's how degraded you've become, but you don't know it, you don't notice it, because you're just like the proverbial frog in the saucepan. So what does it take to convince Western society that it is inherently corrupt and disgusting and evil? I mean, he bombed Iraq, killed all those people, bombed Libya. I can't speak to Iraq because I never went to Iraq, but I went to Libya before it was liberated, and it was actually fantastic. Anyway, but none of this matters because these were all brown people. But now you're on the side of Nazism in Europe and gushing. Where's our little gush button? Effusively. Gushing. Gush. And but at some point, I think the gushometer is going to be turned away from this, and you're going to be educated into the fact that you were the one standing by the side of the road, saluting Hitler and screaming Sieg Heil as he drove past in the open-top Mercedes-Benz, and that you were all guilty. I think that this is what basically the word in Russian is klin. Klin is wedge. I think this is the wedge that they're going to use to shear, to send a kind of like a spike or a wedge through the mind, through the sensory ganglia of feelings and reactions and triggers, in order to educate your nervous system that you were evil. I think that that's what this is kind of geared around. And the reason why I'm mentioning this is because the way that this is going to be done is by some means of tribunal, of evidence. I know nobody cares about evidence anymore. Although you're being kind of taught that evidence kind of does matter a little bit, which I think is the whole point of the Johnny Depp thing going on right now, is that this psychotic, histrionic solipsist, I'm talking here about Amber Heard, is being exposed methodically as such, and that facts do matter. And so we've been through this kind of drama of Believe All Women, and but that's, which is when she kind of got on board with this. But that whole campaign structure has morphed into this new thing, and I think there is some sort of correlation, but albeit in a sort of pop coating between that court case and this. And I think it's something to do with training people that at some level facts do matter. because you've been through a period where they don't matter at all. Hashtags, feelings, my feelings, your feelings, feelings. I feel I'm a giraffe. I feel I'm a 4-year-old child. I feel I'm a woman when I'm actually a man. Whatever. But that whole narrative is being challenged in a way that's so prurient, in a way that draws attention from people who are themselves totally solipsistic, but it gives them a language, or kind of a series of analogies by which they can understand that facts matter. I think that could be what's going on here. Certainly, the West needs to be educated into the fact that facts matter, and at some point, when you realise it's revealed to you, the big revelation that you are Nazis, effectively, I think perhaps that will be enough to make these people realise that actually they are evil. That's what it's going to take, because they don't care about morality, they don't care about God, they don't care about hell, they don't care about judgments, they don't take any responsibility, like Amber Heard, for any of their actions. So what does it take? Perhaps it does take Amber Heard having a great big dump in your bed for you to realise, you know what? That's what we all are. Anyway, let's carry on with this piece of tosh. I don't know if I can stand much more of this. I don't suppose you can either. Russia's defense ministry claimed, blah, blah, in a rare show of emotion. Oh, here we are. I didn't read this before. I can't be bothered. Emotion. I've already got the gush meter on. Well, that's good. In a rare show of emotion during a briefing on Friday, Pentagon Press Secretary John Kirby appeared to choke up as he denounced the depravity of Mr. Putin's invasion, saying it's difficult to look at some of the images and imagine that any well-thinking, serious, mature leader would do that. Well, there you are. Gush. Gush, gush, gush. I hope you're seriously impressed. What is he? Press secretary. A press secretary. You know what press secretary is? It's a professional liar. Okay, that's what they do for a living. They're a press secretary. Their job is to lie to you. I mean, I expect John Kirby has a pretty good understanding of how all this works. I should think John Kirby would be as bored as I am with these videos, because he would just take this as axiomatic. I mean, why would I need training in how to make cheese on toast? I know how to make cheese on toast. John Kirby can probably make spaghetti bolognese and all kinds of different things. Anyway, but he's gushing. So that's enough for them. They're so stupid that gush is all you need. Mr. Kirby, I think Mr. Kirby, is that not the... Oh no, he's the second person who's actually been named in this. Said that while the Pentagon had not seen any signs of major dissent against... here we are. Major dissent against Mr. Putin from his top officials or the Russian elites. Quote, what we have seen is continued indications at lower levels in the army of poor morale, discouragement, and lack of unit cohesion. Well, he has no basis for any of this. And also what they're trying to do is reference, because the whole thing about narrative, whether it's true or not, is it becomes self-referencing. If you've ever, I've never played video games, but I know people who have played them, and apparently you go through levels, and there's a whole thing going on. It's not just moving around and killing things, but there's a whole narrative going on. There's a whole narrative going on here. It's a storyline, and the storyline basically goes something like this: that the Russian people were going to be overthrowing Putin because we all hate him so much because of this, and because he's so evil, and because of the sanctions and something else. Well, now the people who are disaffected are apparently the army. As somebody who lives here, and I've lived in Russia for 20 of about last 30 years, something like that. I have never seen Russia more unified ever. In fact, when this started, it was like this whole cloud that had been over Russia since the first time I came here in 1990 or 1991. I can't remember right now. Certainly the sort of early Yeltsin years of the carpetbaggers and basically banking interests that came in and hoovered up all the money. And they've just stolen another 300 billion. That whole cloud has disappeared. I've never seen this country as focused as it is right now. And it's not that Russians are bloodthirsty people, they're not. But I think a lot of them understand that either you fight this today in Ukraine or you fight it in Moscow tomorrow. it's quite clear that the NATO plan is to, in fact, they've made it very clear, they've admitted as much. It's regime change and basically stealing all the resources of Russia. They liked Yeltsin. Yeltsin spent his entire time on his knees. That's what they want. They don't want self-determination. They don't want the Russian people to decide what they want. I mean, you could argue that at a sort of real politic level, things are not what they seem. I don't know, but certainly they say that they believe in freedom and democracy, but they don't like it when they get it. In fact, they'll go to extreme lengths to destroy it, and that's what your tax money is being used for. Anyway, let's just the idea that the Russian army somehow, what are they supposed to be being? At lower levels of poor morale, discouragement, and lack of unit cohesion. I'm not there on the ground, but I do speak fluent Russian, and I have watched a whole range of videos from all kinds of different people. That's not the impression that I get. Far from it. So, where he's getting his information from, I don't know. Maybe he's a clairvoyant. He's certainly very emotional. They've just now put a bunch more fresh conscripts into the fight. First of all, there's several lies going on here. First of all, more fresh conscripts. Russia does not, as a matter of policy, send conscripts to any military engagement outside of Russia. Not allowed to. So that's the first bit. Secondly, people are joining up because they want to. So they're volunteers. Those people, that's certainly happening, but they're not conscripts. And the Russian army in Ukraine is a professional army. So there are several lies here in one sentence. I haven't got the time to unpick it any further than that, but that's just the fact. Who tend to have high morale going in, which is then shattered after first contact with the enemy, Mr. Kirby said. That's certainly true of the Ukrainians, and there is evidence to that fact, to that end. I've seen pictures of 16-year-old Ukrainian boys going off to get slaughtered. Certainly the testimony in Russian on Telegram channels of Ukrainian soldiers who have very recently made the very logical and correct decision to surrender, saying they had minimal training and were sent off to the front. So that's where that is true, but I certainly don't see this borne out on the Russian side. If I did, I would say so, but I don't see it. Meanwhile, some Western analysts suggested that the Russian assault on Donbass had already turned into a battle of attrition and would likely peter out in a matter of weeks or even days. I don't know if I can stand any more of this. Let's just see if there's anything else. Oh no, it's not too much. It is a battle of attrition. That's what these sorts of battles look like. But again, I refer you to the very excellent Scott Ritter if you want some details on that. So I'm not going to even comment on it. Mr. Putin's renewed assault, quote, holds out almost no possibility of a major Russian victory and more likely will peter out in the next week or so because of unsustainable losses. Phillips O'Brien, a professor of strategic studies at the University of St Andrews, wrote on Twitter. What surprised me about these people is, the internet doesn't really forget. So are they just total prostitutes, or are they stupid and not planning on having any sort of career after this? I hope that you will remember who these people are and what they said. And there are channels out there. My channel, I don't care about any of this, but my channel, for what it's worth, I was getting hundreds of subscribers a day when I first started. It's gone down to 6. It's not a vanity project for me, and I'm going to stop this quite soon, I expect. But it's been shadow banned. Whereas somebody who makes videos about how Russian tanks are all being destroyed and all the rest of it, they get millions of subscribers in a few days or whatever it is. This is how you're being manipulated. I don't know. Decide what you want to do. I honestly think that actually, almost genetically, only about 1 or 2% of people can actually think anyway. So what would you expect? But just remember that they're going to have to turn this boat around, because Russia, from where I'm standing, is winning this hands down. And it's not just beating Ukraine. It's, if you want to use that term, it's a terrible what's going on there, but it's defeating NATO. Oh, another expert, Mr. Dr. Mike Martin, a visiting fellow at King's College London's War Studies Department, suggested that, quote, Russians have sort of fizzled, having, quote, pulled all these mauled units out of Kiev and then tried to reconstitute them for combat in the East. These are your experts. These are the people who get promoted. These are the people that you can rely upon for these sorts of quotes. It's why academia is pointless now. All you have are these supine, well, I don't know how to describe them. I think at the very least you can say they have no honour. If that's enough for them, they can have it. The Russians really had one chance to build these units up, to build up a reserve and then do some bold manoeuvre and surround the Ukrainians in the east, but instead appear to be squandering this chance, meaning we will see the battle for Donbass culminating maybe the next 2 to 4 weeks, Mr. Martin tweeted. Okay, Dr. Martin tweeted. Well, let's just see. Okay, let's see what happens in the next 2 to 4 weeks in the Donbass. Basically, the Russians are gonna. Is this how a doctor writes now? Gonna run out of troops, and the Ukrainians are going to counterattack, he said, adding that Moscow's forces are so poorly trained with such poor morale that they're still sticking to main roads, leaving them susceptible to Ukrainian ambushes and artillery fire. I'll tell you where the Ukrainians are winning and where the NATO is winning is in the informational war. There it is winning. There's no question about it. But what they are is essentially a company with a really, really excellent marketing department and no product. And as far as I can see, the Russians don't care about any of this. They're not fighting this kind of war. Anyway, let's just finish up because I can't stand any more of this. It came as Russian and Western officials, including UK Defence Secretary Ben Wallace, claimed Mr. Putin could soon drop the term special operation and declare all-out war on Ukraine. They can claim what they like. Anyway, let's carry on. Seeking payback for Moscow's failures in Kiev. Moscow, as I say, successfully pinned down 100,000 troops using 40,000 troops while it did other things and set up the chessboard. It's called shaping the battlefield. Again, see Scott Ritter, who spent 35 years studying Soviet and then I believe Russian methods of warfare. This is what it is. Okay? But I don't care whether you believe this or not. But if you want some facts, there are some out there, and I would look up Scott Ritter, search by upload date and see what he has to say on this subject. But payback, this is the level of the narrative. You know, Russia isn't a petulant child. Russia's implementing a policy that it's been stating openly and publicly, in the beginning 2007 in Putin's speech at Munich, again in the last 14, 15 years vis-a-vis Ukraine. Russia has a policy. It's not even to do with Putin. There are people far more hardline than Putin around in the government. Putin's kind of a moderate. If you think if you get rid of Putin, it's all just going to disappear, that this is a figment of Putin's own imagination, that he woke up in the morning and went, oh yes, I think I'm going to go and kill lots of people in Ukraine. It's ridiculous. Seeking payback for Moscow's failures in Kiev, or Kyiv if you're a libtard. Top army officials are claimed to be imploring Russia's president to announce the shift during an annual victory parade. It's not an annual victory parade, it's the annual victory parade on 9th of May, which you may have forgotten in the West, but there was this thing called the Second World War, in which Russia lost tens and tens of millions of people to Nazism. This is, even though the actual people who participated in that war are now dead, their children and grandchildren walk along with pictures of those soldiers. This isn't an annual victory parade. It is the annual victory parade in this country. Just because you have no memory or no history and no morals and no principles, it doesn't mean everyone else is like this, you see. Which would enable Mr. Putin to impose martial law. I see. I read this. It's hilarious. And call on Russia's allies for greater military help and drum up the mass mobilization of its own population. If you can't see why this is propaganda, then I can't help you. I'm assuming if you've watched this long, I can't see how far we've been recording, but you probably understand that this is complete tosh. Obviously it is tosh. But what's interesting to me is that they correctly assume that this is good enough. They seem to be, it's a process of carpet bombing. They're not, what they're just doing is just bludgeoning you over and over and over and over again, because the secret of propaganda is repetition. It's like nursery rhymes. In fact, they're very similar to nursery rhymes. If you study the structure of nursery rhymes, normally in the nursery rhyme you'll have, the three brothers, or the three things that happen, or you have the good and the bad witch, or whatever it is. Nursery rhymes teach you an awful lot about propaganda. Anyway, I'm not going to digress into these types of topics. I've got other things to do today, I expect you all have as well, so I'm going to leave it there, and that's all for now.